This happened a few months ago, and even though it didn't escalate into anything major, thankfully, it stuck with me in a way that I can't shake. I live alone in a basement suite that has those long, narrow, horizontal windows up near the ceiling, the kind that are technically above ground, but still low enough to see through if someone's standing outside. I had not long moved in and hadn't managed to find any blinds or curtains that would fit just yet. I've always felt pretty safe here. Quiet neighborhood, decent neighbors. But this all started with something small. Just my dog waking me up with low growls at around 3 a.m. The first time it happened, I figured maybe a raccoon or possum was out there. I got up, turned on the outside light, didn't see anything, and went back to bed. But it kept happening. The same time every night, 3:17 a.m., growling. My dog would sit facing the window closest to my bed and just stare. I started to feel a bit uneasy, so one night I stayed up, lights off, and watched the window myself. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I saw a silhouette move past the glass. It was quick, like someone walking by, but slow enough for me to catch a glimpse. It wasn't an animal. It was tall, human-shaped, just a shadow. I stayed completely still, didn't turn on any lights. I just waited. A few seconds later, it passed by again, but in the other direction. This went on for 3 nights in a row, just pacing back and forth, always at the same time. On the 4th night, I decided to try and catch whoever it was. I set my phone up with a motion-triggered recording app and aimed it at the window. What I got was unsettling. At 3:17 a.m., the app recorded someone standing completely still, just outside the glass for almost 2 full minutes. No movement, no sound, just standing. I reported it to the police and gave them the footage, but they said without a clear face or license plate or something more specific, there wasn't much they could do unless the person actually tried to break in or commit a crime. They did a couple extra patrols for a few nights, but of course, whoever it was stopped showing up after that. I haven't seen them since, and I have covered the windows, but I still wake up sometimes at exactly 3:17 a.m. Every time I do, I'm like completely still, listening, wondering if they're back, wondering if they're watching from somewhere I just can't see. This happened a couple of years ago, and it still gives me chills when I think about how close things could have gone the other way. So, I work in a high-stress field, and we just wrapped up a brutal project that involved several all-nighters. As a thank you, our boss gave our department the rest of the week off. It was midweek, mid-afternoon, and I was home alone for once, completely exhausted, sitting on the couch in my pajamas, just scrolling aimlessly online. My apartment is on the ground floor and backs up to a quiet green belt. Not really secluded, but not exactly high traffic either. Every now and then, my neighbor's golden retriever, Max, slips through a gap in the fence and noses around my back door for treats. So when I saw a shadow pass across the sliding glass door, I figured it was him. I wasn't in the mood to get up, so I ignored it. About 10 minutes later, I got up to grab something from my bedroom and passed by the hallway bathroom. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement and froze. A man, definitely not Max, was halfway through my bathroom window. For a second, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Then instinct took over. I lunged into the bathroom and grabbed the first thing I could. His hoodie. I yanked hard, dragging him further in instead of pushing him out. which I realize now probably shocked the hell out of him. He lost his balance and crumpled onto the tile, halfway inside, still trying to scramble back out. There was a metal towel rack on the wall that had recently come loose, completely detached at one end. Without thinking, I ripped it down and started swinging it like a bat. The guy started screaming, shielding his head, trying to crawl backward out the window while I was yelling at the top of my lungs and landing hits on his arms and shoulders. He finally kicked off the windowsill and tumbled backward onto the ground outside. I slammed the window shut, locked it, and backed away, still holding the towel rack like it was a weapon. I ran through the apartment, locking every door and window, shaking so bad I could barely hold onto my phone to call 911. The cops showed up quickly, but the guy was already long gone. I gave a full report, including the best description I could. Dark hoodie, skinny, probably early 30s, and they took it seriously. Turns out there'd been a few break-in attempts in the area recently. Someone had been testing windows and doors during the day when people were at work. I don't know if they ever caught him, but I bought window bars, cameras, and better locks that week. And I've never gone back to that half-zoned out state when I'm home alone. I listen, I check, I double lock. This happened 2 years ago when I was renting a small house just outside of Portland. It was a cozy, older place, kind of creaky and drafty, but it had character. I lived alone, and I just moved in after a breakup, so having a space that was mine felt really good. At first, the house had one of those old pull-down attic ladders in the hallway, the kind with the long cord you tug to bring it down. I went up there when I first moved in to check things out, and it was just what you'd expect. Insulation, some dust, nothing stored, no reason to go back up. A couple months in, I started noticing small things out of place. Not huge, just weird. I'd wake up to find the kitchen light on, or a cabinet open that I swore I closed. Once, I found a cereal box on the counter, opened. I chalked it up to stress, maybe sleepwalking, or just being forgetful. Then I started hearing noises at night. Not just house-settling creaks, but very specific sounds, like soft thumps or light footsteps above my bedroom ceiling. I convinced myself it was raccoons or squirrels. I even called a pest control company, but they didn't find any sign of animals. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One night, around 2 a.m., I was in bed scrolling on my phone when I heard a definite thump directly above me. Not a scurry, a step. I froze. It happened again. A slow, deliberate creak of wood. My whole body went cold. I got up, grabbed a flashlight, and pulled down the attic ladder. I wasn't thinking clearly, just acting on adrenaline. I climbed up slowly and scanned around. There was nothing, at first. Then I noticed something odd in the far corner, behind one of the beams. A small pile of items, a stained blanket, a plastic water bottle, snack wrappers, and, no joke, a small notebook. I didn't read it. I didn't touch anything. I climbed back down, locked my bedroom door, and called the police. They showed up quickly and did a full sweep at the house. Nobody was up there by the time they arrived, but based on what they saw, the blanket was still warm. They believed someone had been living in the attic, sneaking down at night to eat, use the bathroom, maybe even just watch. I changed the locks the next day and moved out within a week. I never found out who it was or how long they'd been there. The police said it was likely someone who got access during the move-in process, or even a previous tenant who never really left. What scares me the most isn't just that someone was living above me. It's that they were so quiet for so long. I didn't notice until they wanted me to. This happened a bit over a year ago, and to be honest, I still don't really understand what the guy wanted. I live alone in a quiet townhouse complex, and while I don't consider myself overly paranoid, I do pay attention. I work from home, so I notice the usual delivery schedules, regular neighborhood foot traffic, that sort of thing. One afternoon, around 5 p.m., someone knocked on my door. Not rang the bell, knocked. That already stood out to me because I have a pretty visible doorbell camera, and most delivery drivers ring it. I looked through the peephole and saw a man in a bright yellow and gray delivery vest, holding what looked like a small cardboard box. Pretty normal looking, mid-30s, average build. No logo on the vest or hat, which seemed weird, but not totally unheard of. Sometimes third-party couriers dress plain. Still, I checked my phone for a delivery notification. Nothing. No out for delivery, no tracking number, no recent orders. I opened the door a few inches with the chain still on. He smiled and said, "Package for you." "From who?" I asked. He hesitated for a second. Then he looked down at the box and said, "Sorry, I forgot to check the label. Mind if I come in to confirm the name?" I didn't answer. I just shut the door. I watched through the peephole as he stood there for a few seconds, then walked away. Not toward the street, not toward a truck. He walked around the corner of my building and disappeared from view. I checked my camera feed. No van, no logo. He had walked up on foot. I called the non-emergency line and reported it. The officer who came to take a statement was polite, but said unless he actually entered the home or committed a crime, there wasn't much they could do. He advised me to keep my doors locked and call immediately if he came back. Here's the part that really bothered me. When I reviewed the doorbell footage again, I noticed something subtle. The guy wasn't holding the box naturally. It was kind of tucked under his arm like a prop, and when he turned to leave, I got a glimpse of the side of the box. I couldn't see a label anywhere on the box. I don't know what his plan was. Maybe he thought I'd open the door wider. Maybe he was just checking which houses were occupied. Or maybe he wanted to be invited in. Whatever it was, I'm glad I trusted my gut. This happened back in 2018, and it stuck with me in a way I can't really shake. I've only told a few close friends, but one of them suggested I post it here to see if anyone else has experienced something similar. I still don't know what I encountered that weekend in the woods, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. I was 21 at the time, and had gone up to rural northern Michigan to visit an old family friend who I'll call Tom. My dad and Tom had been close since childhood, and he owned a small hunting cabin out near Burt Lake, surrounded by thick forest and marshland. No neighbors for miles. My dad couldn't make the trip, so I went with my older brother to help Tom with some firewood and get the cabin ready for deer season. The cabin was modest, just 2 rooms, no electricity, and a wood stove for heat. Since space was tight and it was early fall, Tom said I could crash in the old pop-up camper parked about 200 feet behind the cabin, down a thin path and tucked under some old pines. It was dry, safe, and honestly, I didn't mind the solitude. The first night, we had it chilly, sat around the fire, and listened to Tom's stories about bear sightings and strange things he'd seen over the years. Nothing outlandish, just enough to make you side-eye the trees after dark. I headed out to the camper at around 11 p.m. with a headlamp and a sleeping bag. About halfway down the path, I clicked off my light to look at the stars. They were incredible. But in that moment, I noticed how uncomfortably quiet it had gotten. Not just peaceful forest quiet. I mean dead silent. No wind or branches making any noise. No insects chirping. Just this heavy, pressing stillness. Then the feeling hit me, like I was being watched, like something was standing just beyond the tree line. I don't know how to explain it, but I suddenly felt completely exposed, like I was prey. Every instinct in me screamed to move. I bolted to the camper, slammed the door behind me, and locked both latches. I tried laughing it off, told myself I was just rattled from the stories and the isolation, but I barely slept. I kept hearing soft sounds outside, faint footsteps on the leaves, what sounded like brushing against the canvas sides. It never got close enough to be sure, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was circling the camper. The next day, I told my brother, and he teased me for being dramatic. But Tom was quiet. I think he knew I wasn't making it up. That night, I asked if I could bring his dog, Scout, with me. Scout was an older lab mix, usually lazy and laid back, but solid. The walk back to the camper that night felt easier with Scout trotting beside me, until we got near the tree line again. That's when Scout stopped. His ears went up, his head turned slowly to the side, his tail dropped. He didn't bark, he didn't growl, but he didn't want to move forward either. We eventually got inside, and Scout curled up next to the bed. I started to drift off, until I had this horrible, vivid dream. Something was whispering my name from just outside the canvas wall. It wasn't malicious, just wrong, repetitive, like someone trying to mimic my own voice. I woke up in a sweat, and Scout was sitting up, facing the corner, hackles raised, ears pinned back. Morning couldn't come fast enough. I packed my stuff up and told Tom I'd head back a day early. He didn't question it. Before we left, I took Scout out into the clearing behind the cabin for some fresh air, hoping to shake off the weird feelings from the night before. I decided to check out the edge of the woods a bit, just to walk around and clear my head. As I walked along the path, I was half focused on Scout, who was sniffing around, wagging his tail like usual. But something made me stop. I noticed a strange set of marks in the dirt, leading from the woods to the clearing. They were deep, jagged scratches, almost as if something had dragged itself across the ground. The dirt was torn up like claws had been raking through it. I bent down to get a closer look. The marks led toward the edge of the woods, but they stopped abruptly. I mean, they just ended. I straightened up, feeling uneasy. I turned to call Scout, but before I could get a word out, he froze. He was standing just beyond the marks, staring into the woods. His body was completely still, eyes locked on something in the trees. I called his name, trying to get him to come back, but he didn't respond. His ears flattened against his head, his tail dropped. He didn't even twitch. I started to walk toward him, but something prickled the back of my neck. It was that same sensation of being watched, but this time it was different. It felt like I wasn't just being watched. It felt like something else was there, something much bigger. When I reached Scout, I grabbed his collar. I noticed something I'll never forget. His eyes were wide, staring directly into the woods, as if something was standing just beyond the trees, watching us. Then I heard it. My voice echoing back from the woods. It wasn't loud, it wasn't even close, but it sounded like my voice, delayed and distorted, almost as if it was trying to repeat what I just said, but not quite right. I turned and yelled, "Scout, come here." The echo came again, but this time it was louder, more insistent and wrong. It wasn't me anymore. I froze. That was it. I didn't even look back. I grabbed Scout, yanked him toward the cabin, and ran. I tried explaining what happened to Tom, but he just looked at me with this unreadable expression. He explained very seriously that if I hear a voice from the woods, to ignore it and never respond to it, and under no circumstances was I ever to go to it. And then he told me to think no more on it. I haven't been back since. I think Tom knows more than he lets on. My brother thinks it was just an echo or my imagination, but I know what I heard, and Tom did too. This happened in January of 2019, just a few months after my partner and I moved into our first house together. We relocated from Arizona to a small, quiet town in upstate New York. It was meant to be a fresh start, slower pace, more space, clean air. And it was, for the most part. People have warned us the winters were rough, but most locals had said it had been years since they'd had any real storms. That first January, though, we got hit hard. One night, it dumped over 18 inches of snow, the kind that shallows your car tires and buries your porch in a single go. The roads were shut down, schools closed, and my job told me to work remotely for the next few days. The snow eventually started to melt. My partner works at a power plant about 45 minutes away, and he left that morning like usual, around 4:30 a.m., long before the sun even thought about rising. I remember watching the taillights of his truck disappear through the snow as he slowly made his way down our long, wooded driveway. Around 7 a.m., I got up to feed our dog and get the car started, thinking I'd run a few errands if the roads looked halfway decent. I bundled up, grabbed my keys, and headed out the front, and that's when I noticed it. There were bare footprints on the porch. Not boots, not sneakers, not even socks. Just a trail of muddy human footprints, starting at the far corner of the porch and leading directly up to the front door. And they were small, smaller than mine. Definitely adult-sized, but not big. I just froze. It had been well below freezing all night. There was no thaw, no slush. Nothing that should have left that kind of mud. It was hard-packed snow and ice for miles around. And here's the really weird part. The footprints didn't come from anywhere. There were no other prints in the yard, nothing leading up to the porch, nothing in the snowbank or along the path we usually shovel. Just those muddy prints, like someone had appeared out of thin air, walked to our door, and then disappeared. Then I noticed the handprint, right in the center of the door, maybe 3.5 feet high, was a dry, dusty-looking mud smear, clearly a right hand, palm flat against the door, fingers splayed slightly, as if someone had pressed on it gently, like they were trying to push it open, but didn't. I leaned in to inspect it. The mud was already dry, which meant it hadn't just happened. It had been there for at least a little while, long enough to dry completely in the freezing air, long enough for me to wonder how I hadn't noticed it when I let the dog out earlier. Now I was officially freaked out. I walked the perimeter of the house, looked for more prints, in the snow for broken branches, disturbed powder, anything. There was nothing. The entire property was pristine, except for those footprints on the porch and that single handprint on the door. I called my partner at work. I didn't want to freak him out, so I started casually asking if he'd come back home that morning for any reason. "No," he said. "Why?" I told him what I found. There was a long pause on the other end before he said, "I would have noticed that. I didn't see anything when I left. It was just fresh snow." By now, the dog was pacing by the window, tail down, not barking, just watching. And even that was strange, because he's normally pretty vocal. If a squirrel sneezes near the porch, he'll raise hell. But this time, he was just staring at the door. Quiet, still. We didn't have security cameras up yet. We'd been putting it off. We installed them that weekend. That night, I didn't sleep well. Every creak of the old house felt louder than usual. The wind against the windows made me jump. I couldn't shake the image of those bare feet, some person walking through freezing snow. No shoes, no tracks behind them, just appearing on my porch. I never saw anyone, never heard anything, and nothing ever came of it. At least, not that I know of. But I swear, something stood on that porch, in the middle of a snowstorm, barefoot and silent, and it wanted in. This happened in September of 2021, while my partner and I were staying in a remote cabin in northern Idaho, near Priest Lake. It was part of a little 3-day getaway we'd planned last minute to disconnect and do some hiking before the weather turned. The cabin was a rustic rental, no Wi-Fi, no cell reception, and about a 25-minute drive from the nearest store or gas station. We liked that part, until we didn't. The place was simple. 2 rooms, a wood stove, and a covered porch looking out over a ridge. The whole property was surrounded by thick pine forest, beautiful during the day, creepy as hell at night. The first evening was uneventful. We cooked, played cards, had a couple of drinks, and we turned in at around 11. The bedroom had one big window, but it was facing away from the tree line toward the road, if you could call it that. I remember it being unusually quiet that night. No bugs, no wind, not even the usual forest sounds. But I chalked it up to the elevation, or maybe the chill in the air. Somewhere around 3 a.m., we both woke up at the exact same time. No loud bang or anything like that, just this weird, shared sense of alertness, like something wasn't right. And then we heard it, scratching. It wasn't frantic, it wasn't animal-like. It was slow, deliberate, rhythmic, coming from the outside wall of the cabin, right behind our bed. We both sat up. I whispered, "Did you hear that?" My partner just nodded, wide-eyed. The scratching continued, 2 or 3 swipes at a time. Pause. Then again, always in the same spot. It sounded like claws, not nails, not paws, but something dragging across the wood. I got up, thinking maybe a raccoon or porcupine had gotten curious. But as soon as I stood and moved toward the window, the scratching stopped. Dead silent again. No footsteps, no running, just nothing. We stayed up a couple more hours, half expecting it to start again. It didn't. Eventually we dozed off again, but slept like shit. The next morning, we walked around the outside of the cabin to check the wall, and that's when we saw them. Right below the bedroom window, in the pine needles and dirt, were about a dozen small bones, like animal bones. They weren't buried or scattered, just piled there in a messy little mound. Some were cracked, a few still had something dark stuck to them, maybe dried sinew or tendon. There were no scratch marks on the wall, but the dirt was disturbed in a wide semicircle, like something had been pacing. We didn't see any animal tracks, not even deer. No fur, no prints, nothing. We showed the bones to the owner when we checked out the next day. He looked at them for a long time and just said, "Huh, that's weird. Never had anything like that happen before." He seemed more uneasy than curious, like he didn't want to think too hard about it. We haven't been back to that cabin. We still talk about it sometimes, though. How weird it was that we both woke up at the same moment. How whatever it was seemed to stop the second I moved. And, most of all, how those bones were just left there, like a warning or an offering. This is a story of my first encounter with the paranormal that I can remember. I was about 8 or 9 years old, playing with my little cousins at their parents' house during a family gathering. Behind their house is a large forest located in northeast Florida. My cousins, their neighbor, and I were playing hide-and-seek in the forest, and the only rule their parents had was to stay within sight of the house. Of course, we didn't listen. I was getting bored of the game and wanted to do some exploring. I convinced the other kids to join me as we headed deeper into the forest. I noticed this ball of light floating in midair. I thought I was seeing things. I remember rubbing my eyes just to make sure it wasn't in my head. I asked my cousin if they saw it too, and when I pointed it out, they confirmed it was there. It was bright and bobbed back and forth, changing from a yellowish color to a transparent green hue. We followed it for I can't remember how long, but we reached a small cabin and the orb disappeared. It was dusk at this point, and curiosity got the best of me. My cousins and their neighbor kid were too scared to go up to it, but I peeked inside the window. I saw a dim light inside through a window, and what I thought was a human skull sitting on a table next to some jars. Then a shadow from within moved across the far wall. I got chills and signaled the other kids to run back the way we came, and I took off immediately behind them. We ran as fast as we could and didn't stop until we were inside the house, and I locked the door behind us. I remember getting into trouble because our parents couldn't see us from the kitchen window. I didn't tell my mom or anyone else what I saw, because I didn't want to scare my cousins or worry our parents. To be frank, I'm not even sure if what I think I saw was even there. Later that night, I woke up to the sounds of helicopters and dogs barking outside. It was well past midnight, and I asked my mom, who was standing in the kitchen with the rest of the adults that stayed over after the party, what was going on. They all had their eyes glued to whatever was happening in the backyard through the kitchen window. She said they found the body of a woman in the forest and a cabin where her killer was staying, and that there was a manhunt going on. I remember not being able to sleep for the rest of the night, and also the glaring white lights that shone through the folds of the blinds from the helicopters above. I'm not sure what that orb was. Maybe it was the spirit of the woman who is trying to lead someone to her killer. I'm not even sure if one of the other kids told anyone about the cabin we saw, and if it was maybe one of the other parents that called the cops. I just remember us not being allowed to even go near the tree line anymore when we visited, and after that night, I never wanted to anyway. I'm 24 now, and have had many other experiences since then, but this is the one that I actually forgot about and was reminded of recently when reading up on will-o-wisps. I thought I'd share where it all began for me. So I've been on Grindr for about 10 years, and I've had plenty of fucked up experiences. This one in particular reminds me of when I was at a party with my own car. My phone was on 10%, but a decently hot Grindr guy said he could pick me up, and we could hang out at his place before he drove me home. So of course I jumped on the opportunity. Anyway, we got to his place, and he got me pretty drunk. Not unusual for me. But he never tried to make a move. I assumed he was going to wait and just convince me to stay the night later. Finally, my phone died after like 2 hours. The last 1% lives a lot longer than the rest. And I didn't even have to say anything before he noticed it was dead. Then he stood up and was like, "Well, let's go to the car then." When I asked if he had a charger I could use, he just said, "No." After we got in the car, he got kind of quiet and less flirty, and I spaced out, just enjoying his music and looking out the window. I didn't even notice that he never asked where I lived, until I realized we'd been driving for over an hour, not even towards my town, but into the canyons, Greater Salt Lake City, Utah area. And I asked where he was going, and he just said, "Thought we could go for a drive." And my drunk ass was like, "Oh, okay." So anyway, to make a long story shorter, he ended up taking us 4 to 5 miles down a dirt road with no signs of houses until it dead-ended into this cabin with no lights on or cars outside. And he parked and turned the car off. That's when the dread started to creep in as I sobered up. I said I drank too much and should probably head home, but he didn't even respond. He just sat there, staring at the cabin. Then he said, "You said you like being kinky. You're pretty submissive, correct?" And I said, Sure, but I meant like normal, rough kind of shit, nothing wild." And he started to sound a bit more annoyed, and his sentences seemed a bit less carefully worded, like he was just spitting out the bare minimum of each thought. He said something about how some of his favorite people are those who can find pleasure in pain, and like if someone goes into shock enough times, eventually it becomes like a drug and they crave more. Then something about how pushing a person into the deep end is the fastest way to teach them to swim. At that point, I was scared enough to assert myself and said firmly, "Okay, well that sounds fun, but just not tonight. I want to go home now. This place is creepy." And he just sighed and gripped his keys tighter. Then, right as I glanced at his phone sitting in the cup holder, right before it occurred to me to grab it, he snatched it up so fast and held it to his left hand, kind of behind his head, to make it clear he wasn't going to let me near it. I made this kind of wah sound, and he just gave me this almost "I'm proud of you, son" half smile, like dads do when they pat your shoulder or something. It was quiet, and he kept looking me up and down for a minute or so, and then got a bit more gruff and said, "Let's go inside. I have these friends you'll really like once you meet them. You'll feel a lot better," or something to that extent. But he wasn't even trying to sound genuine or comforting, like he'd been doing so well earlier in the night. Finally, I lied and spoke up a bit and told him, "I told my roommates and my friends I was meeting up with you before you picked me up. I sent screenshots of your face in some of the conversation. They're gonna freak out if I don't charge my phone and reply to them in the next few hours." I tried not to make it sound accusatory, but more like I was just worried about my friends going crazy. But it was clear he knew what I was implying. At that point, he let out an exasperated, grunty sigh and started the car and drove away. He kept the headlights off all the way back down the dirt road for some reason. Driving back, I got nervous about him stalking me and coming after me in the future. So I tried to apologize and tell him I'd be down to hang out another time maybe. But tonight just wasn't great for me, and blah blah blah. He didn't say a single word the whole drive back, and didn't ask where I lived. I didn't intend to tell him either, but he dropped me off at a McDonald's about 40 miles from my apartment, and when I was stepping out of the car, he suddenly leaned over and gave me a hard shove, so I almost fell out the rest of the way. He then grabbed my backpack off the floor and flung it out of his window across the parking lot, and then peeled out with the passenger door still open. He broke my laptop and cracked my phone, and I had to ask a stranger to use her charger and call an Uber. But at that point, I was just so anxious to get home, I didn't give a shit. What's so weird is how, while it was happening, even though I was terrified, I guess I wasn't thinking about exactly what he was planning to do with me. I just knew I needed to get away. So it wasn't until I got home and got in the shower that I realized how fucked it all was, and what might have happened if I'd let him walk me into the cabin, and all that stuff. I remember being so shaken and smacked by the reality of it. It almost felt like a panic attack. So I sat down in the shower with my head between my knees, and I cried until it ran cold. I got out and woke my roommate up to tell him about it, and he kind of calmed me down. So while I still have a Grindr account, I really just use it as an ego boost. I'm reluctant to meet up with anyone from it now. Anyway, girls and guys, I suppose the moral of the story is that we have to be damn careful out there. I went to a graveyard at about midnight with a group of friends to visit an old friend who died in a car accident. While we were standing around his grave, telling good stories about him, I hear a faint voice of an elderly woman. One of my friends says out loud, "Oh shit, what the fuck?" I stand up and look towards the source. I see a very old woman, literally dressed in a white tattered nightgown, about 100 feet away. She started talking to us. "Sir, get over here now. I need help," she said. We stood still. No one said a thing. The part that weirded me out was that she used the singular word, "sir," when clearly there were 5 of us. She started walking closer and started speaking again, but even louder. "Boys, I need your help, now." Note the plurality. Then, she literally started running towards us, screaming nonsense. We were all scared out of our minds, so we ran back to the car with this old woman close behind. We reached the car, which was a 2-door, and everyone got in before me, including the driver, so the driver's seat was blocking my entrance to the back seat. I yelled as I approached the car, and the driver got out and let me in. Doors slammed, and we flew down the small graveyard roads to the opposite side where the exit was. This is where shit got weird. We get to the other side of the graveyard in like 10 seconds. We're speeding toward the exit, and we approach a curved road that was well lit, and the old lady ran onto the road. No way she ran over there that fast. I see her trying to chase us down, and finally, she lets out the most terrifying scream I've ever heard. It sounded like she was being murdered slowly and painfully. We fled the scene just seconds after and never returned. 4 other friends of mine can testify as witness to that night. It's by far the most terrifying experience in my life. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have a scary story you'd like me to read on the channel, please send me an email or post it to my subreddit. You can find details of this in the video description. It's the stories that make this, and this is the best way to ensure variety in the stories I share. Thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to my channel members and patrons who now have special access to ad-free videos and other behind-the-scenes content. Once again, thank you guys for listening. Have a great night.